Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Stuck Mic AvCast, the AvCast about learning to fly, living to fly, and loving to fly. Today we have a special guest who's actually also a co-host, and that's James Spearman. And the thing that we talked about in the past was the fact that he was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross Medal, and that is incredible. First of all, I want to say this, James, congratulations.
Well, thank you, Carl. It's always, awesome to be on your show. I look up to you, honestly, and you're helping so many people in the industry on a day-to-day basis, which is awesome with this podcast and the aviation careers. So any way we can add more, encourage more people to join in the fun, the better. So I'm a big fan of what you do as well.
Thanks, James. I appreciate that. And one of the things that we love to do is help people in all different aspects of flying and to learn from other people's mistakes and other people's experiences. And that's why we're talking about this today. And just to let you know, for those people that don't know what the Distinguished Flying Cross is, it's a medal awarded to any officer or enlisted person of the armed forces of the United States for heroism or extraordinary achievement while participating in aerial flight. And we are so proud of our co-host, James Spearman, that he was awarded this Distinguished Flying Cross. And he's going to tell us a little bit about that experience, what he can discuss, of course, because this was during a military operation. But the most important thing to realize is this is a really distinct crowd. The Distinguished Flying Cross is the fourth highest award for heroism and the highest award for extraordinary aerial achievement. It's actually, to get this award, the achievement has to be entirely distinctive. It's also involving operations that are non-routine, which you'll find out in a minute. This was not routine. And it's not awarded for sustained operational activities in flight. So this is really something that is very, very specific and something that's very unique. And I'm really excited about this, and I can't wait to find out more about what he did. But also, I want you to learn about what you can learn. I want you to think about what you can learn from this experience and relate it to your flying. Whether you're flying a Piper Cub or you're flying a large jet, I think we all can learn something from James. Well, James, first of all, let's talk a little bit about just an overview as to why you were awarded the medal and then get into some of the specifics.
Yeah, so I was awarded the medal for one of my sorties that occurred over this past summer. We were operating out of Qatar and in support of Israel and the surrounding nations. And then one of the nights that I flew, Iran had launched directly at Israel. And the first time they'd ever directly launched at them. It normally is through proxies or third party, if you will. But this was the first time that they've actually launched and struck Israel directly. And so there was a really big buildup. We knew something could happen at any time. And the sortie that we flew, we were just going to go up and do a normal sortie. They had ideas that it could be that night. When we took off, we realized that we were the only people flying. All of the other airspaces had shut down their airspaces. They were denying clearances to get up in to our operating areas. And so we definitely had the jitters. We knew something certainly was going to go down. And but we still had a job to do. We were tasked to refuel F-15s. When we got to our area, normally it's more of, hey, how's it going? What are you up to tonight? What'd you eat at the chow hall, that stuff. This night they were straight to business. We're ready. Give us as much gas as you possibly can right now. And, we refueled them as quickly as we possibly could. And you could hear, they were announcing bogeys. And I'm no fighter guy, so I'll get all that terminology wrong. But they all of their targets, and they were ripping off the boom as quick as I could to go impact them. The big deal is Iran had launched, over 100 ballistic missiles, over 100 cruise missiles, over 100 drones. And the sheer amount of loss of life that could have happened from that attack would have been substantial, and it certainly would have sparked a really, really big conflict in the Middle East if most of those missiles had landed. And thwarting the actual attack de-escalated the area. And so that's really, the mindset why they awarded the crews in that night. So a lot of innocent people that night in Israel. We protected them and our not to mention our military in between too. So
absolutely, and hats off to you and all those other people that were out there helping everybody throughout the world, and the fact that we help protect so many people. It's amazing what our military does, and I know we don't want to go into specifics of it, but I think that there has to be something that said is that 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, our military are actually out there protecting and serving our nation and also the world, and de-escalating and helping people with relief. There's many things they do that we don't really talk about. I wish we could, but I think it's hats off to those folks that the unsung heroes, but also those people that do get some recognition, like you did. And it's not just for that night as to what happened there. It was kind of the hair was going up on the back of my neck while you were talking. I'm glad when I go to sleep at night I don't think about those things. And that's the great thing about our military, is that I can sleep fine at night knowing that we're being protected and by an incredibly well-trained military force. But let's go into a little bit on the details. I know and I understand that you can't go into all the details as to what happened, but there's something very unique about what happened to you and your aircraft that really pushed it over the edge, getting this distinguished flying cross. And we also can learn from that. So tell us a little bit about, what you described didn't seem like so far, there wasn't anything really out of the ordinary other than this was a live mission.
Yeah, there was, several other crews that flew that night too. And the sheer amount of teamwork that it takes to get one of those planes off the ground to begin with, and then not to mention the fighters to do the job that they did, to do that. Once we peeled off and started headed back home, not to mention we were being threatened the whole time, by adversaries over the radio. You could see off in the distance the contrails from all of the missiles. And we only, the intelligence that we had told us they probably are just going to launch drones, which would be, operate at a much lower altitude, would not really affect us. And then we realized it wasn't really until we made it back that, there was certainly ordnance above us, beneath us, and potentially at our cruising level. And we had no clue. Tanker doesn't have any weapons guidance systems. So we were just a big kind of flying gas tank. Once we saw that and we were headed back home, our crew specifically encountered an in-flight emergency where we had one of the engines. We thought we were going to have to shut it down. We started having erratic oil pressure, which, I fly a lot of GA, and for the most part, erratic oil pressure, and especially in a piston plane, that means the engine's going to fail most of the time. Mike Bush talks a lot about this. So those are the things that were started going through my head. And obviously in our manual and the tanker, we've got a threshold of how much it can fluctuate before we have to, precautionary shut it down. And so we're like, oh my gosh, on this night, here we go. And it kept fluctuating, and we kind of pulled it back to idle just to see what happened. But then the cockpit lighting, and imagine this is all at night too. So the cockpit lighting starts to swell, and when I say swell, I mean the lights start to brighten and then go back down. Think like you're having an electrical surge on the lighting, and so everything around us starts surging, and at some point we start losing some of our instruments. They start coming offline because they're not getting adequate voltage, and in that moment we turned off, tried to just focus solely on that right there, right then and there. And the neat thing about the tanker is you've got three, and the team that I was with was incredible. The other pilot that I flew with and the boom operator, we'll be friends for the rest of our lives. And it took a lot of days through when we deploy, we stay together the entire time. We sleep in the same apartment. We, or our rooms are all in the same. We eat together. Everything is together. We do these missions. They're 9 to 12 hour missions typically, and every single day. So you grow pretty close. And myself and the other pilot, we just with being kind of just task saturated, you just got so much going on, and now the emergency doesn't really clearly make sense, because we had oil pressure to begin with and now electrical, and it's just like, whoa, what is going on? And it was funny, the pilot that I was flying with, he's like, James, fly the damn airplane. And so I started losing instruments, and we're at night, we're over 30,000 feet, and I'm looking outside VFR at night trying to keep it steady. I actually had my a Sentry with me, and I popped it out and brought up my iPad, on ForeFlight, where it's got the little ADI, and so I set it down, where I could see it best I could, but I was just, looking outside the window at 30,000 feet. It doesn't sound that big of a deal, for GA pilots, but once you get up, over 18,000 feet, you start to lose your references. You're pretty much IFR. You're not looking outside the airplane to fly it. So, and the the pilot and the boom actually guided us to the right checklist where we needed to be, because he and I were going in different directions. I was like, man, I really think it's this, and he's like, well, I think it's that, and the boom operator was like, guys, I really think it's this one. And we look back and we're like, okay, let's do that. And what turned out was we had a engine driven generator that was failing. It didn't fail yet. It was failing in a very slow way. And so it wasn't putting out, consistent voltage and the hertz that it puts out, the amps. And so it was causing swelling and a surge in the electrical system. And until we tripped it off, everything, that's when everything kind of came back and was fine. There's supposed to be a bus tie breaker that takes it offline automatically, but it was failing so slowly that it didn't. And so we ended up having to, there's no way to know which one it is. We tripped off the generators one at a time, and then finally we're in a cold, dark jet, right? The engines are still running, but there's no lights whatsoever. And then bring them back on slowly one at a time to see, which one causes the issue. So it was, it was scary, but the team that I was with, we worked really well together, and we had been through a lot of sorties, a lot of adversity to begin with. So we were able to work through that together. And yeah, I love those guys. They're awesome.
Well, this is a really harrowing experience, but there's a lot to unpack in what you just said. So I'd love to go back over this, and we'll talk a little bit about how you found out about your award later. But let's go back to the first thing you said, fly the airplane. That is the number. And it was interesting, the person that told you this. And just so that people understand, what are the roles in the flight deck? So you're the captain, you're the aircraft commander. If you could just go over that first, and then we'll talk about that whole, philosophy is number one, fly the plane.
Yeah, so there's an aircraft commander, a co-pilot, and a boom operator. And then while I was deployed, I fulfilled the co-pilot position. We're dual qualified though in each seat, and so anyone can be, either pilot can be the pilot in command. You're flying the airplane, and so when, let's say, the person in the right seat takes over the controls, now whoever's sitting in the left seat he's the second in command. He's pilot not flying. He's handling all of the radios. He's handling, it kind of changes when the autopilot's on or off, but he's doing the checklist, doing the radio primarily, while the pilot flying is focusing on managing the autopilot or hand flying the airplane. The boom operator it's really cool, his role in the cockpit. Obviously we're flying him to work, right? He's the reason why we're going to do what we're going to do. So that's always the joke. We're flying him to work, but it's true. But that's only a short part of the sortie. So the rest of it, he's sitting up front and with a bird's eye view he's not having to worry about flying the airplane. And he's educated he or she is educated in, what's going on inside the cockpit. So they've got a lot more brain bites to help out. And it's awesome to have that piece there.
Absolutely. Interesting what you said, but going back to that fly the plane, was that helpful for someone to actually, use the auditory stimulus to say, hey, fly the plane?
Yeah, because, well, initially, the autopilot was flying the plane, right? And then once we started losing power, we lost the autopilot. And this is a recommendation that I do give to people. The Air Force does this. In GA, let's say you're flying with a friend who is a private pilot or has a lot less experience than you. Obviously, if it's your airplane, you know the plane in and out, and you're likely going to have the most experience. The Air Force realizes that whoever the aircraft commander is, the one with a lot more experience, is going to have the most knowledge. That both people should be able to fly the airplane. So you hand off the plane to, normally the co-pilot or the lesser of the experience, and let them fly the airplane. Just handle that, and then the aircraft commander and the boom operator can work together and use their experience to get to a better or a conclusion as quickly as possible, which is pretty cool. And I actually do recommend that if I fly with friends and I know for certain that they're, let's say they're a private pilot or whatnot, they can fly the airplane. How about you fly, and I'm just going to manage this situation?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, they a lot of airlines train that too, where the actual persons, they fly and do the radios, maybe a little bit different, and the aircraft commander or captain is the one that's running the checklists. But it's up to the captain to do that. Actually, they can actually say, "Hey, you manage this, and I'll fly the plane," if they feel that it might be a very challenging situation. So that could happen. There is that instance where maybe the person with the most experience should be actually flying the plane because it's a challenging flying environment. It might be an instance where there's damage to the aircraft where you might be handling the airplane better. But for the most part, it's usually handed off to the most experienced individual. And I love what you say, like in GA, many times we have people that are flying with us that are pilots, and sometimes they're not, but they know enough to help us in many ways. And that's where you talk about this, and it was really interesting what you said, is the team. And in general aviation, we have a team also. I know you have a team, and there's many processes that are in place, very defined and distinct. We can do that ourselves. We can define roles, even for the person sitting next to us. Say, hey, if you see an airplane, just point at it, just so that I can see it too, that type of thing. So as far as that team environment that you work in, first of all, you're coordinating this. There's the aircraft commander who's actually primarily coordinating this. But how could we, as general aviation pilots, maybe learn from that, from what you do in the Air Force?
Yeah, I do recommend, handing it off, letting somebody. You only have so many brain bites, like a computer, like so many bytes that are going around, and so task saturating yourself in an emergency is not good, and it sometimes is. The Air Force talks about this, and the FAA does too, as a human factor. But people in general, when things don't go good, you actually try to control more and grab more things, and you're just overloading yourself. So it's actually better to, let's delegate as much as I can so I can free up as many brain bites as I can to really focus on this situation. And then if you've got friends flying with you, put them to work. You've got them there, and expectations are great. Obviously, if you're flying passengers for hire or something, it doesn't make sense. Uh, but maybe it does. But setting clear expectations and a good takeoff brief is another great thing. We're about to take off. Here's what's going to happen while we're still on the ground. Here's what we're going to do after takeoff, and delegating a role. And if this happens, I want you to do this for me. So
and you base that on either the experience or your operation.
Yeah, when me and the wife fly, she knows. I mean, her her thing is, if a radio call, she's, if we're all talking in the cockpit, and normally she's quiet reading a book. If we miss one, she's like, "Oh, that was us,"
Hey, wake up! Say something, right? Going back to that whole, you fly, and the next thing you're doing is assessing what's happening. It seemed like there was a lot going on. You had this communication where there was some discrepancy or disagreement possibly as to what was wrong. How did you, first of all, work through that and then finally decide what was wrong?
Really, the boom operator, I think, obviously the generator was going to fail at some point and take itself offline. But we didn't know that's what it was. So it's slowing down and trying to take in as much as what you can. Both me and the other pilot flying had maintenance backgrounds. Both of us were A&Ps. Sometimes that helps you, sometimes it doesn't, because you tend to overthink things. In my brain, especially in GA planes, this is something that's relatable. I try to look, anytime I see a failure, let's something simple like a EGT. So EGT starts, this is very common, it goes up and down, starts freaking out, it X's out, goes down to 0. Well, did that mean that we just lost that cylinder? Well, do you have any other associating, any other symptoms, like a rumbling engine, or did you have a reduction in power? Did the EG or the CHT go away as well? So those are accompanying symptoms that would back up, okay, this is an indication problem, or this is an actual problem with the cylinder. And so that's where my brain tries to go. And that's what made this one a little bit hard, because I'm like, okay, oil pressure fluctuating. My brain is thinking for this other symptoms that are engine related, and we never got any. We started having electrical symptoms, which was just, whoa, that is weird. And so it really took, with us being task saturated with, again, there's like missiles going on, and you've got Iran threatening, and the situation, it can really bog you down. And yeah, me and the other pilot, we were kind of going back and forth, and having that extra body in the cockpit really helped. It helped us solve it much more quickly, because he was able to sit back, not worry about flying the plane, not worry about the radios, not worry about anything else, and just look at what's happening, and then start going through the checklist. And yeah, he did awesome. I can't give him enough kudos that night.
I wish we all had somebody that could sit behind us in the cockpit in our 172 to help us out. Maybe
that's right. Hey, dummy,
look,
it's this one.
It's this one. And it's interesting, as an instructor, we sit there and we watch things either devolve or whatever, and we can see it coming from miles away because they're so focused, and they're tunnel vision, and they don't see what's happening. And
I bet you've got a lot to say about this, being a simulator instructor.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tell you, I feel for everybody when I see it happen. But one thing that is good about doing that training all the time, especially in a simulator, and this is kind of what I wanted to get out there, is that get in a sim and have these type of situations so that you can do, just like James is saying, slow down, but not just talk about it, do it in the sim, because it's so much easier. And we all have access to a simulator now, right? It can be on our PC, etc. But having somebody in the back seat, and you're sitting there like, oh my God, I can't believe they don't see it. But you have to say to yourself, what if I was sitting there? What would I do? And boy, you really learn. As a matter of fact, like the last emergency I had, I just told the FO, okay, you have it. And I crossed my arms. I said, okay, what is going on? Let's think about this. I took 1 second and a deep breath. I always take a deep breath, and somehow you get that oxygen back in your brain. It's hard to do, but after a lot of training and all, especially in emergencies, I think that helps. And I think that's something the military gets to do a lot more than anybody else. Obviously, they have the budget. I get it. But we can have that budget, too, by going into some very simple simulators to simulate these type of instances. Go through exactly what James said. Try to have some electrical problems in your airplane and see what happens. I mean, and also flying at night. I mean, let's remember this. You're flying at night. And you have these other tools. You talked about a team. But an interesting thing that you said, and I think this is so cool, is the fact that you took a tool with you that you could use in flight. So for those that don't understand what that is, the Sentry and the ForeFlight, like how did you have that ability to make that work? And as far as having in the cockpit, would you recommend? Assuming you'd say yes, bringing one along.
Well, yeah, certainly. A lot of my, most people, the military is really slow to getting on with ForeFlight. Now they've fully both arms around it. They've embraced it. But I mean, even 1 year ago, it was a lot less. I assume it's probably the same with y'all in the airlines.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Just because I fly so much GA, I always kind of have messed around with ForeFlight, and I'm no expert or wizard, but I knew there was a function in there that made the PFD pop up, and I was like, I'll give it a shot. I just thought about it, and it worked. It actually worked. Never used it before. I also used to joke and like, there's no practical application for that. Why the heck is that even there?
Now you know, right? So when you were up there, though, do you think without that you would have been able to fly? Did you have enough of a horizon to keep it level, you think?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I would have lost control of the aircraft. It wouldn't have been pretty, but I think I would still been. The really neat thing, this is going, a lot of people really love, anyone that flew the KC-135, it's truly a pilot's plane, and it's a really tough plane to fly too, and even the best pilots that I've ever flown with, that plane will go out one evening and it'll kick their butt all flight. But you can actually set known pitch and power settings, just like it's a lot more common in GA. People use that phrase. I don't typically fly like that. I like to, use more of what it needs in the moment, not just, okay, if I set this many degrees nose high and this, power setting, it'll give me that. Because a lot of times it doesn't, based off of the situation. But that plane you totally can. It's funny, 2,000 pounds of fuel, across all four engines. Set that on the fuel flow, and about 1 to 2 degrees nose high or 3 degrees nose high, and that thing it'll fly straight. And it's a really cool airplane.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, I'd love to go into more of what's inside the airplane, but obviously there's certain things we can't talk about there. But as far as the plane is concerned, by losing electronics, I'm assuming you have like EFIS and all. It's all electronic PFDs and that type of thing. Is there?
All glass.
Yeah, all glass. Okay, so and as far as standby instruments, can we talk a little bit about that? Or
yeah, actually, sorry. Let me say that again. The plane. Okay, so the new version of the KC-135 has all glass. It's called Block 45. That day we were flying Block 40, which is this old style of the tanker before they went to all glass. So you had glass PFD and the HSI. However, the engine instruments are all still analog. They're electrically controlled, but they're all analog steam gauges. And then this plane that we flew is like a notorious across the whole fleet. It's the plane that nobody wants to fly. It's Bertha, is what they they call it. They've got another nickname for it. I won't say it on here, but
yeah, we can't say it.
And that plane, since me and the other pilot had maintenance backgrounds, we always took a lot of pride in getting it off the ground, because most crews would always cancel in the chocks. They'd never get it off the ground. And so me and him were just driven. I remember the first time, this was probably a week prior to this mission or whatever, maybe a couple weeks. there was 3 or 4 crews in a row that just canceled in the chocks. And then once the jet gets a bad rep, like the pilots are just, they're looking for stuff. And we looked at each other. We're like, we're going to get this thing off the ground. And we did. We had all the failures that we had was in that plane. That was the only emergency that we had to declare that night. But yeah, it was funny. And that one, you do have, I can't remember on the old school. I think it's still an original, Steam ADI, but it's for the co-pilot to see that, or a person sitting in the right seat looking across cockpit. It's way too far, especially at night. You can't see it at all. It's there, but not really.
Right.
So
need a flashlight.
Yeah, that's right. And the cockpit's huge, right? Like I couldn't reach it. I'd have to lean all the way over to even touch it.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. It's, the other thing too to remember, like to relate to GA, and most of my instructors flew in Vietnam. They would turn to me and say, well, at least no one's shooting at you. But in this case they were. And so that's something you can kind of, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't when we're in a GA aircraft, is that, well, at least no one's actually shooting at us. So all we have to deal with is what's happening inside our airplane at this time. How does that, just so that, we can relate, it's a tough thing to think about. I'm sure it gets some people a little bit, nervous, some angst. Do you think about that as far as, other than the situation inside the cockpit, what's going on outside?
Yeah, especially military flying around the world. There's always we got to have certain clearances to enter different airspaces in different countries, and there's so much that goes on in just one sortie to get from the United States, let's say, to the Middle East, even just that travel. And so we're always conscientious of that, and all of these countries have air defense systems. You're always in your head like, yeah, we got the clearance to go fly through here. I hope they turn those things off, So, heck, it wasn't that long ago, didn't Iran shoot down one of its own airlines a few years back?
A while ago, yeah. So that, that can happen. There's some friendly fire, absolutely, that goes on in the world.
Yeah,
things that we can and can't talk about, right?
Yeah, that's right. But I would say, the circumstances of mine, obviously I'm very gracious to receive the award, especially like you said, the people along with it, like Amelia Earhart, Charles Lindbergh, Chuck Yeager. So those are some of the names that actually received this award, which is really cool. But if you look back in Vietnam, and I encourage people in GA, just if you love aviation, look at some of the stories. All of the citations are published, so you can pull them up. But people from the Vietnam era that received this award, they're jumping out of airplanes that are falling apart or saving their crew members along the way. We met one that came to our ceremony. He had 2 distinguished flying crosses. I think one was out of an F4 during a combat sortie, and then one was flying the SR-71, which is just crazy. So cool. So I don't, do I feel like I'm as deserving as them? No way. But one thing for me that, each person that I've talked to, or even on YouTube, they've got a lot of videos of the interviews of people from World War II and on that received the award. They always remembered that one mission, that one sortie. They'll never forget that one sortie, and that's what I connect to with them, because I'll never forget that flight and the team that I was with.
Well, we'll probably never forget this either. As far as this has been actually amazing. This related experience and this thing that you live through, that you'll live through on and on throughout your life. I'm sure it'll come back and remember it in many different ways. But one of the things I thought was really cool, and I'd love to hear you relate this story, is how you found out. I don't know if you can relate that story, that you were actually getting this, and the fact that you kind of thought it was something that was bad at first.
Yeah, it was funny. My commander back home is he's a great guy, honestly, but I don't know if he thought this was. He was just so excited to let everyone know. That's one really good thing about him. He always he wants to reach out and show recognition when it's due. And so he was so excited to let everyone know, and he wanted to be the first person to tell them. He didn't want, anyone else hearing it from the side. But I don't get a lot of text messages or phone calls from him. And so he sends me a text and says, "Call me now," which universal for that's not good. This is bad. And so I call him immediately. I'm like, "Oh, hey, sir, how's it going?" And he's like, "Actually, can you call me back in 60 seconds?" I was like, "Sure, man, I'll do whatever you want." And I was like, "Well, I'm actually coming in to fly this evening. Would you like me, to stop in there?" And he says, "Oh, yeah, no delay. Come straight to my office. Don't go anywhere else." And I was like, "Ooh, this is not good. This is bad." And so I show up later that afternoon. I walk straight into his office, knock on the door, and he's like, "Oh, James, great. Go ahead, take a seat." And then he walks out and walks down the hallway and grabs the other commander and pulls him into the office with him. I was like, "Oh my God, he is getting a witness. This, I am pretty sure I did not do something." But I was like, "What could this possibly be?" At that point, I was like white. My face was white. I was terrified of what was coming. And then they close the door behind them. They both sit down. They look at each other and look back at me, and they say, "Well, do you want to tell him or me?" And he's like, "Oh, I guess I'll tell him. James, you're getting the Distinguished Flying Cross." And at that point, I was like, "What the heck is that?" Like, I just took me by surprise. He's like, "Do you even know what that means?" I was still like, I mean, I'd heard of it before, but, I was still thinking I was getting court-martialed, Like, my brain was still not in the right spot. I was like, "Okay, so I'm not in trouble?" No, you're not in trouble. We just wanted to make sure we were the first ones to tell you because we're so proud." Oh my gosh, you could have told me that.
Think you're going in and someone's going to tell you did something wrong, and all of a sudden you get one of the highest medals that you can get in the Air Force and in the armed forces. James, I tell you that I really appreciate your talking about this and relating what your experience was. Is there anything else you want to kind of relate to those that are in both general aviation and we have a lot of listeners that do both GA and airlines? Maybe one takeaway from this instance, what might help people that are out there flying today that might make them safer?
Yeah, I think, especially through an emergency situation, just slowing down and I think using the tools that are available to you, using teamwork, and this, we have, both of us are business owners too, right? So it's similar. There's so many lessons that you can take from the cockpit and apply them in life. It always seems like it's something is always happening, right? And I remember when I first started in business, I mean, something happened. I'm like, "Well, that's it. We're done. This is over," And it was like, "Well, no. You wake up the next morning, you're like, "Oh, okay, that's fine. Made it. Okay, fix that. Okay, next thing. Move on." And having that kind of, not going into a flight or fright mode, slowing down and just trying to take in as much information and work through it, make the best decisions possible. Trying to stay level-headed, and the tools. You had talked about it earlier. Kind of the phrase is aviate. Aviate, navigate, communicate. Right. So just slowing down, fly the airplane first, then worry about where we're going, and then worry about talking on the radio. Not trying to do too much at once. But those would be my takeaways. And obviously, I'm a extremely passionate person in aviation. I love it. It changed my life, and I want as many other people to join in the fun as possible. I know that's your mission too, Carl. So there's so many great stories. The Distinguished Flying Cross Association, and on YouTube, there's plenty of videos. Go and just listen to those stories. It's awesome. Mine is just one small story compared to a lot of them. So it's really cool, and it's just, you can learn a little bit of something from every single one of them.
And the society is dfcsociety.org that he's talking about. And they have from there links to some of those YouTube videos that you're talking about. Amazing information out there, and some And most people like yourself are very humble about it and realize that, it did take a team to get them there. It takes a team to keep us moving in aviation. I know a lot of times we think we're flying there alone, but we're not. There's many people that have helped us get to where we are today. Remember the first instructor you had probably helped you during this emergency. Everybody does. It's all additive, and we are basically the whole of all these parts from all these other experiences and other people in aviation. And that's the wonderful thing about aviation. And the neat thing too, for those people that are considering aviation and getting into flying, I mean, it helps in every way, just like you said with your business. These emergencies that you've had to deal with, it helps you in life, and you can relate that to other situations, and it'll help you in your personal life and also in your business life and just in general. And I think aviation really is additive. I think it's a wonderful thing. I think we both are very passionate about it, and of course, today we're honoring James for getting this Distinguished Flying Cross and this award, and hopefully someday we'll be able to see it or get a picture of it. I know people don't like to show them off too much, but I'd love to see that, and make sure that if you're thinking about this and you're listening or watching right now, that maybe you go back and listen again to some of those things that James talked about, what we talked about here. But I think it's really important to learn from other people's experiences, good and bad, so that we can become better pilots moving forward and keep this passion going and keep ourselves flying. And James, again, I appreciate you being here. They can find you actually online, and you talked about being a mechanic at your website, and that website is?
SpearmanAircraft.com.
SpearmanAircraft.com. And of course, here at the Stuck Mic AvCast, it's been great having you as a co-host because you have a wide variety of experience. And that's what's been wonderful about everybody on the show. Is just everybody has so much to bring. And it's just so wonderful seeing you, who's a passionate aviator, military, mechanic, GA, you still like to fly low and slow. I think that's really cool. And the fact that you got this award, I think it was well-deserved, and it was well-deserved amongst the team that you were with, and the fact that it is a team sport here in aviation. But we act as individuals, but collectively is how we provide a really safe environment for flying and also an enjoyable environment. That's why we do this. But a real shout out to those folks that have helped us move this podcast along so we can bring these stories to you, and that's obviously our sponsor. And these folks have actually been willing to give away scholarships to people that want to get into aviation and into aviation like flying for the military. And that's Stratus Financial. And they're giving away those scholarships guides. Check them out, stratus.finance. If you want a free scholarships guide, go to stuckmicavcast.com/free. Use the coupon code Stratus. And they are a big supporter of people actually going into the military and also through the civilian world as far as financing and their ratings or just kind of consolidating their loans. But most importantly, I think from this experience here with James is that we try to learn from what happened there and try to bring it into our own experiences and say to ourselves, what would we have done in that situation? And we really appreciate, James, your being able to relate this. I know it's kind of hard because there's so many things we can't talk about, but I think it's wonderful that you were able to talk about this at all. And another thing I want to do is shout out to you, but also a shout out to all those people out there that serve in the military here in America, throughout the world, because of them, me and the rest of us here listening, watching, can sleep comfortably at night knowing that we're well protected and the world is going to try to become and stay a stable place. So thanks again, James. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you, Carl. Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, folks, if you could do me a favor, hit the like button on this and subscribe. Share this one with other your friends because I think this is a really important message to get out there about aviation. We love bringing it to you. We love, living to fly, loving to fly, learning to fly. We love all things about aviation, and you can learn from the situation. But most importantly, get out there and fly. Do something every day to get your passion moving forward in aviation. Sometimes you can't fly. Sometimes it's watching videos on YouTube like maybe you're doing now. Maybe it's just reading a magazine. But I really encourage you to do something every single day to grow that passion for aviation and your knowledge, just like listening to James here. We'll talk to you next episode. Safe flying out there.